He is the last man on Earth, with the responsibility of increasing the population with up to 6 women to ensure the survival of humanity. The task seems favorable to all man. The movie begins with a field trip of a certain classroom. Today marks the final exam day, determining whether they will pass or not. Semez, who is the instructor, leads everyone to an ancient site. However, a nuclear explosion occurs worldwide, wiping out all humanity except the class. Semez brings everyone into a specially constructed shelter where they must stay for 365 days until the radioactive fallout subsides. The major problem is that this facility was built to support only 10 people, but there are 21 of them. This means that they have to select who will stay because otherwise they will all die due to the lack of oxygen, as there is only enough reserve oxygen for 10 people. Females are more crucial than males in this situation, as their role in procreation is vital. Semez states that for the sake of humanity's survival, they must choose with the utmost care. Each person is selected based on their abilities and other contributions. James is a farmer. Petra is a structural engineer. Harvey is a real estate agent. Chip is a carpenter. Utami is a singer. Plum is a fund manager. Russell is a musician. Yoshiko is an astronaut. Jack is a chemist. Andy is an electrician. Rissy is a wine cellar. Georgina is a bone surgeon. Nelson is a homemaker. Beatrice is a fashion designer. Parker is an ice cream seller. Vivian is a zoologist. Bobby is a psychiatrist. Bonnie is a soldier. Ami is a parliamentary member. And finally, Kobe is a poet. Once Kobe's introductions were completed, Semez immediately ordered the shooting of Kobe. He claimed that there was no need for a poet in the world as his abilities were worthless. Semez secretly took out a gun from the shelter. Petra asked why he was doing this, and Semez explained that Kobe might resort to violence. Alternatively, he might kill someone else to secure his place inside. The voting process began, and it was clear that no one voted for professions deemed less useful, such as musicians, wine cellars, fashion designers, homemakers, ice cream sellers, real estate agents, singers, and astronauts. On the contrary, vital professions like carpenters, electricians, farmers, chemists, psychiatrists, doctors, structural engineers, and parliamentary members received the votes. Finally, Professor Semez was also chosen due to the mystery of his abilities. Then, everyone requested a brief moment before parting ways. However, multiple gunshots were heard in succession. Semez had shot all those who weren't selected, explaining that they asked for it because they didn't want to die from radiation exposure. Petra then turned to others, suggesting that they shouldn't let Semez inside. James quickly changed the subject, urging everyone to gather vegetables from the nearby area as a backup food source. As Semez realized he was now alone outside, he noticed that everyone had entered the shelter. They began to thoroughly explore the shelter, finding exercise equipment and all the amenities needed for a comfortable life. Additionally, there were beds for various activities under the shelter. After the joyful activities, Petra opened the door to check on Professor Semez. Semez informed them that he was the only one who knew the door's code, and at this point, no one could open the door, even if they wanted to. Everyone was left to count the days, anxiously anticipating the end of 365 days. Although they lived under stress, anxiety, and uncertainty about the future, they had enough stored food to survive. Finally, after a year had passed, it was time to open the door with the code as Semez had instructed. Everyone tried every possible way to open the door, but it was to no avail. The last box of food was distributed among them, and it quickly ran out. The reserve oxygen was also depleted, leading to the death of everyone inside. In the end, the film reverted to the classroom scenario. It was just a philosophical thought experiment for the final exam, where everyone worked together to analyze and solve the problem. The choices made during this test would affect each person's exam score. Petra, who was the top student, did not like this kind of exam and requested to withdraw without caring about her grade. However, Professor Semez stated that he would give everyone a failing grade, causing Petra to reconsider and take the test. Semez started a new test, changing the location and resetting the scenario. It was still an end-of-the-world scenario, but everyone had additional roles. James, who was a farmer, remained the same. He disclosed that he was gay, but he could still impregnate women, so everyone voted for him. Regarding Georgina, who was a doctor, no one voted for her this time because of the risk of contracting Ebola from patients. Next was Plum, the fund manager, who coincidentally had a large amount of gold with her. She was also a woman. The profession was considered necessary and received votes. Next was Petra, who was both a structural engineer and an electrical engineer, so she was easily voted in. As for the electrician, Andy, he did not receive votes because he was deemed useless. In the realm of psychiatry, it was considered necessary for mental well-being, but the psychiatrist had issues with ovarian dysfunction, preventing her from having children, so no one voted for her. Next was the real estate agent, who used to be a doctor. She was chosen due to her previous medical experience. On the professional homemaker side, it was deemed necessary by some, as it meant they wouldn't have to do housework themselves. However, when the poet started to speak, Simez shot him. The voting continued, and those selected included a farmer, a carpenter, structural engineers, chemists, Professor Simez, an ice cream seller, a homemaker, an investor, a former doctor, and a parliamentary member. The chosen individuals rushed to get on a truck, hoping to drive away and survive. However, they all eventually died. Meanwhile, those who were voted in hurried into the shelter. That evening, Petra woke up and witnessed her boyfriend in a relationship with another man. James quickly came to apologize, saying he still loved her the same way. But the narrative pointed out that he was gay, so what could he do? Then, everyone began discussing how to increase the population. Those who lost their rights included Chip, who was a monk. As for James, he was gay. Harvey had religious beliefs, and only 3 couples were ready to procreate. Petra wasted no time and immediately took back James by dragging Professor Simez into the room. These 3 couples made every effort daily for over 2 months, but no women became pregnant. Harvey said that stress was the primary cause, and the miscarriage was not due to ignorance. He emphasized that the most important thing is the survival of the human race. Simez suggested that all the men should take turns to have relationships with the women. Bonnie disagreed with this idea, as it contradicted her moral values. Simez considered eliminating Bonnie to prevent resistance and to ensure the survival of the human race. Luckily, Jack intervened to help. The 2 of them fought, and Jack used a pencil to stab Simez in the ear. Simez then went to open the door, causing everyone inside to die. The final test began with only one left. They arrived before the explosion occurred. As they reached, Simez rushed to grab the gun in the shelter. After a moment of hesitation, Petra entered the shelter and hugged Simez. Petra asking for everyone's trust to be the one to choose who would enter the shelter. Everyone agreed, and Petra selected the wine seller, the fashion designer, the poet, the musician, the doctor, the chemist, the ice cream vendor, and the flower seller. After Petra made her choices, Professor Simez strongly disagreed, but Petra was ready to return the gun to him. However, she only returned it along with 2 bullets, as James had a weapon and was prepared to use it. Simez said that he couldn't shoot because he was the only one who knew the door code. At that moment, Bonnie revealed the door code, which she had secretly observed when Simez opened the door during the previous test. Simez had to accept this. Then, James allowed Petra to stay with him, and Petra willingly gave up her spot to Chip, saying she had time to escape to an island outside the explosion zone. Chip then called for Petra to bring the key and insisted that she enter the shelter. Afterward, Chip quickly sailed to a distant island. For those in the shelter, this round was different from the previous ones. They were not stressed. Instead, they enjoyed themselves. They had good wine, played cards, had poets, singers, and musicians. It was a year of happiness that went by quickly. When they finally left the shelter, they found that there had been no explosion. Even though they were supposed to die, they didn't care and decided to detonate the explosives themselves. As they were about to do so, Simez intervened, but everyone was determined to act irrationally by detonating a nuclear explosion, resulting in their deaths. Before the final test was conducted, Chip said that their group was still alive. The reason they switched was because Chip saw it as their only chance to be with the women, up to 6 of them. However, 3 of their male friends wondered where they had gone. Chip explained that one of them had been eaten by a fish. Another had been hit by a falling coconut, and Harvey had drowned. In the end, only Chip and the women remained. Chip planned to be with one woman per day, with the seventh day as a rest day. His male friends were quite puzzled by his situation, as Chip was a monk. Chip replied that it was all good, because having weak sperm did not mean it was hopeless. Instead, it meant the women had to work harder to ensure the survival of the human race. They all thought about this. Finally, the movie concluded with everyone passing the test.